Good morning, colleagues. The fourth special session of Imina 35 na Legislature in Guam is called to order, and I would like at this time to recognize our Majority Leader, Vice Speaker Nelson. You are recognized.
Mananasitas, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move to adopt today's fourth special session agenda dated December 30, 2020.
A motion was made to adopt today's fourth special session agenda dated December 30th, 2020. Are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Majority Leader, Vice Speaker Nelson, you are recognized.
I move to waive special session agenda items 2 through 6.
Thank you, Majority Leader. A motion was made to move to waive special session agenda items 2 through 6. Are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. At this time, Madam Clerk, Kadziman Gaigi Gwini, put for vote. Please take roll.
Senator Castro, Senator Lee, Senator Marsh Taitano, Senator Moylan, Senator Munya, Speaker Munya Barnes,
Mananasitus Gagya,
Vice Speaker Nelson, Senator Perez, Senator Ragel, Senator San Agustin, Senator Shelton, Senator Taitagui, Senator Pito Terlahi, Senator Therese Terlahi, Senator Torres. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Sidzus Masi, Madam Clerk. Majority Leader, Vice Speaker Nelson, you are recognized. You are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to approve the third special session legislative journal dated September 14, 2020, subject to corrections.
Thank you. On the motion to approve the third special legislative journal dated September 14, 2020, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Majority Leader, Vice Speaker Nelson, you are still recognized.
I'd like to move to waive special session agenda item 9.
On the motion to waive special session agenda item 9, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Majority Leader, Vice Speaker Nelson, you're recognized again.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to advise the members of the message from Imagahagan Guahan specific to the call to special session and move that the message from Imagahagan Guahan be appended to today's session journal.
At this time, I would like to recognize, thank you, Majority Leader, but at this time I would like to recognize Legislative Secretary Senator Amanda Shelton to read the message from Imagahagan Guam for the listening audience and our colleagues.
Sidious Masi, Madam Speaker. This message is dated December 29, 2020 to the Honorable Tina Rose Munya Barnes, Speaker, Imina 35 na Legislature in Guam, regarding Bill number 429-35, an act to amend Section 1216 of Article 2, Chapter 1, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to authorizing the issuance of revenue bonds of the A.B. Wampat International Airport Authority, Guam, to refund all or a portion of its outstanding general revenue bonds, 2013 Series A general revenue bonds, 2013 Series B, and 2013 Series C, and to authorize further refunding bonds. Dear Madam Speaker, I write to you requesting that the Guam Legislature act on a bill that aims to assist our only commercial airport, the AB Wampat International Airport Authority, Guam, GIAA, by authorizing the refinancing of its outstanding revenue bonds so that it may achieve debt service reductions beginning in this fiscal year, FY 2021. We are all aware of the devastating impact the 2019 novel coronavirus COVID-19 has had on our island economy, and this is no different for the GIAA. The reduction in employments from an average of 5,000 per day to 5,000 per month has negatively impacted airport finances and requires swift action to ensure our airport weathers this storm of uncertainty. The GIAA has experienced significant reduction in airport revenues, with an approximate $30 million lost in FY 2020 and an uncertain future in FY 2021. The GIAA has performed its due diligence in reducing airport operational expenses by almost 20% in FY 2020 and continues this reduction in FY 2021, while continuing to improve upon its ability to reduce the risk of spread of COVID-19 through its operations. The GIAA has invested in the installation of thermal screening points as its terminal building, installation of transparent barriers at all passenger processing points, increased frequency and intensity of efforts with custodial services, installation of UV filtering in its air handling units, and installation of touchless technology in restrooms. Bill 429-35 aims to assist the airport even further by authorizing it to refinance its existing debt to reduce debt service costs, adding to the reduced operational expense footprint the GIAA has already achieved. In order to welcome more visitors to Guam safely, we must ensure we provide the airport with the tools and flexibility necessary to manage the uncertainty in the air travel industry. Similar to the hotel occupancy tax refinancing, which sought to assist our Ailing Visitors Bureau with operational funding as a result of savings achieved, Bill 429-35 would extend similar consideration to the GIAA. As I understand it, Bill 429-35 had a public hearing on December 15, 2020, and a committee report was filed and posted on the Guam Legislature's website on December 17, 2020. Seeing that Bill 429-35 has gone through the legislative process, it is my hope that the Guam Legislature acts swiftly in passing Bill 429-35 so that we can empower our airport by ensuring the continuity of operations our economy needs. The path toward economic recovery travels through the GIAA's runways and walkways, and I urge the Guam Legislature to act favorably on Bill 429-35. Therefore, pursuant to my authority under Section 1423H of the Organic Act of Guam, I am calling the Legislature in Guahan into special session on Wednesday, December 30 at 10:30 a.m. for the sole purpose of considering Bill 429-35, an act to amend Section 1216 of Article 2, Chapter 1, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to authorizing the issuance of revenue bonds of the AB Wampat International Airport Authority, Guam, to refund all or a portion of its outstanding general revenue bonds, 2013 Series A, General Revenue Bonds 2013 Series B, and 2013 Series C, and to authorize further refunding bonds. Thank you for your attention to this important matter. Sinceramente, Lourdes A. Leon Guerrero y Magahagan Guahan, Governor of Guam.
Colleagues, on the motion that messages from Imagahagan Guahan be appended to today's session journal, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Majority Leader Vice Speaker Nelson, you are still recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to waive special session agenda items 11, 12, special agenda items 11, 12, 13, 15, and 16.
On the motion to waive special session agenda items 11, 12, 13, 15, and 16, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Majority Leader, Vice Speaker Nelson, you are still recognized.
All senators are present today.
Thank you. Colleagues, then, we are in second reading file, and at this time, I will address Senator,
Oh, no, yeah, you go ahead. I'm so sorry.
I'll address Senator Joe San Augustine, author of Bill 429.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As customary, when we're dealing with any bill that addresses appropriations or dealing in funding, that we would go into the committee of the whole. And I know that there are probably numerous questions that our colleagues would like to ask GIDA, the airport, BBMR, and the folks in reference to this bill, that I ask that we go to the committee of the whole. And I have contacted them, so it's a matter of now, when we recess, making sure they're online and they're ready to answer any questions by the body.
Okay, with that being said, on the motion as proffered by Senator Joe San Augustine, are there any objections? Any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. We're going to take a moment's recess so that we can set up for the committee of the whole. We are in recess. Yes, minus.
Colleagues, I think we're back on now. The Committee of the Whole is called to order. I would now like to call upon the panel for their introduction and for the Sergeant Arms to swear them in. We have present with us, we should have the folks from GITA and the folks from the airport and OFB. Okay, if you can all introduce yourself on the panel so that right before the Sergeant Arms swears you in, we have Ms. Mendiola from GITA. If everybody else can introduce yourself, I know I see Ricky. I just don't want to, and see Steve, but the other two, I don't want to murder your name. Oh, that's Frank Santos, okay. And the other one? That's Ms. Ariola? Oh, okay. All right, go ahead, Tom. Go ahead and swear them in, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I have anyone panel please raise your right hand? Okay. Under penalties of perjury, do you guys all affirm that any information and all information that you provide today, be it verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Can I get
Frank Santos, I do.
Steve Guerrero, I do.
Ricky Hernandez, I do.
Mel Mendiola, I do.
Okay, Mr. Jeff, I believe they're all under oath.
All right, thank you. We will have, my colleagues, we will have 2 rounds of questions for the panel, with each senator allotted 5 minutes for questions, not including their response. Be reminded, not including the response, so be careful how much you talk around the question. And I'd ask that the questions be germane to the bill, and then we can move along. At the completion of the 2 rounds of questions, panelists will be excused until called upon for the next bill if there was another bill. Amendments to the bill will be discussed after the 2 rounds of questions. Amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk via email. Amendments not in writing will be called out of order. After you complete the amendments on the bill, next, we'll continue the process to all bill. At which time, then the bill will be reported out. All right, we'll recess, adjourn the Committee of the Whole. All right? At this point, we will start with, to begin the question, I'll ask Senator Moylan. Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question is, usually for the refinance of the excess funds, we use it for the third floor, the shortfalls. And I understand from the public hearing that the excess from the refinance will be for operational costs and debt service costs. So if one of the panel members can explain, is there any plans for the shortfall on the 3rd floor, and what will we be doing with that? Any member of the panel, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Ricky Hernandez. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to the body, and thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Moylan, for the question. So this Bill 429-35 allows us to refinance existing debt, and really the key and what we're trying to achieve really is that we're obviously we're having difficulties in meeting our projected revenues for fiscal year 21, and there's a lot of uncertainty over the next, not only this fiscal year, but next fiscal year. And so any debt service reduction will help us meet the possible reduced revenues. And so we're hoping that there is actually cash flow that we can realize in savings. But the uncertainty with revenues, even with what we're expecting in terms of cash debt service reduction cost savings, that there may not be any actual cash flow savings if our revenue numbers don't come in as projected. And so really the key here is really what we're trying to do is we're trying to refinance debt with lower interest rates with obviously a requirement of a 2% net present value savings. And what we'll be doing with that is we're hoping to fill the gap in the revenue. We do hope for achieving that projected revenue, but we're just really trying to fill that gap because we've cost cut around 20% of our operating expenses. And so an additional debt service cost reduction will be very helpful for us in meeting what we're expecting to be not receiving the revenues that we projected for the fiscal year 21.
So there's no progress on the third floor. Is that what you're saying? You need this money completely for operational costs, correct?
Yeah, there's a separate capital budget for our capital improvement projects, and so this bond really we're looking at reducing debt service costs. It has really no bearing on our capital improvement budget because I think what we're doing is we're just reducing debt service costs to add to the reduced operating expenses that we've already, and we continue to look at increasing those reductions or obviously reducing further to meet our reduced revenue. But if I may, Mr. Chair, I do have Frank Santos on the line as well that may be able to elaborate a little bit more. I will just add and note before Frank does talk, there has been progress on the international arrivals corridor, and we expect probably in the next 45 days or so to complete phase one, the west arrivals corridor. And so there has been continued progress on the project. But if Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, if Frank could
Yes, please.
probably add a little bit more.
Please do so,
Thank
Mr. Santos.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and Happy New Year to all the senators. As Ricky had mentioned, phase one is in the midst of being completed. In fact, Guam Fire and DPW were there this morning for final inspections. So phase one, which is from gates 4 through 10, would be operational, or we plan to have it operational in January. We're targeting somewhere in mid-January. For the rest of the project, we are in discussions with the contractor on a solid completion date and final costs to get it to that completion date. So those discussions are continuing. And right now we had extended the contractor's completion date, contract completion date to January 15th, 2021 also. So from that point on to any negotiated date, we are working diligently with our construction management team as well as our management team.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Another question then would be, what's the current rating for the airport? Are we on a credit watch or have we improved?
Senator Moylan, are you pretty much asking for credit rating? Maybe Gita can tell us, maybe can answer that, or if not, Ricky?
Yeah, either one on the panel. Mr.
All right.
Chairman, please. Thank you.
Ricky, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I guess I could take that. Thanks for the question, Senator Moylan. It does speak to the ability for us, right, to go out to the bond market and actually sell these bonds. But our credit rating, there are two rating agencies that actually rate the airport bonds. The first one is S&P, and the other one is Moody's. And for Moody's, our rating is still investment grade. They, if I'm not mistaken, I believe, and Mel, Gita, correct me if I'm wrong, the Moody's rating is investment grade. I think it's Baa2, which is still investment grade. But I believe they put us on a negative outlook. So there's outlooks and then there's ratings. For S&P though, they took a much bolder approach and a much more aggressive approach to not only the airport rating on Guam, but to airports around the nation. And so what they had done was they had, without any changes, obviously, in the management of airport, which the rating agencies has mentioned has been a positive on the ratings. They did reduce the credit rating on the S&P side to 3 notches down from what it used to be, which I believe was triple B plus, down to double B plus, I believe. And so I may be wrong on the pluses, but it was downgraded to non-investment grade on the S&P side, but on the Moody's side, I believe it's still currently Baa2, which is an investment grade rating.
Gita concurs with Deputy Administrator Hernandez's response. S&P is currently double B positive with a negative outlook, and Moody's is Baa2, also with a negative outlook.
Okay, thank you very much. And then talking about the bonds, and anyone on the panel as well, when we're asking for the bonds on the exemptions, are we considering a triple tax exempt? For anybody on the panel to answer, please.
Correct. Well, generally, when Guam goes after new issuances as well as refinancings, triple tax exempt is optimal. However, in this case, we are not going after the triple tax exempt market. We are going into the taxable market. Despite that, the analysis done by GIAA, GITA, as well as the governor's fiscal team, BBMR, and DOA, still believe that we can derive savings, not only of net present value, but more importantly, of the short-term cash flow needs of the airport system. And so this is a taxable issuance. It is not a triple tax exempt issuance. Having said that, there is a market, there is demand for taxable issuances, particularly from airports, because right now with the vaccine, the market has been pretty hopeful about and pretty optimistic about debt issuances along these lines.
Okay, thank you. Just another question then. I know we're looking at the bond in a couple of months, and you need this time frame to get the paperwork done and so forth, but what's your anticipated rate for the bond, if you have any, please?
Let me see. The anticipated rate for the bond, I think if you just give me one moment, Senator, let me just take a look at my notes. I believe we were still looking at an all-in of about 4.2 at the current, given some of our current analysis, 4.2%.
Okay, and Melanie, while you're on there, will GITA be charging for the refinancing to the airport?
Yes. GITA will be assessing its fee, basically consistent with the GITA statute of all bond issuances.
Okay. You're looking at any
as well as out of pocket if there's also the sorts of things that might come up that are directly charged to the bond, such as if there's additional legal opinions that are necessary or additional disclosures, additional resources for bondholders that might be desirable, bond investors that might be desirable to have. Those are the sorts of things that might be tacked on as expenses related to the bond.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Madam Speaker?
Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak and ask some questions and being part of your co-sponsorship. And I just want to make sure that these questions are prefaced and making sure that there's clarity, and know that the intent of this bill to authorize the refunding of all or a portion of the airport's outstanding general revenue bonds with the series 2013 A, B, and C through the issuance of one or more series of federally taxable or tax-exempt general revenue bonds. And then one thing that comes to mind is the terms and conditions of the proposed refunding include requirement that the present value of the debt service of the bonds issued to fund the 2013 bonds shall be at least 2% less than the present value of the debt service on the bonds being refunded. So the proposed legislation also intends to authorize further refunding of the refunding bonds in the future on federally tax-exempt basis. So I did have 6 questions. One of the questions were answered, and maybe Mr. Chair, if I may just throw it out there, and anybody on the panel could be able to answer it, and I'll just state the questions first so it's easier for me, if that's okay with you. So one is, how can you pay for the bonds with our revenues being down? What are the revenue projections for the remainder of the fiscal year? And the question about it being used for operations was already answered. And because revenues are down and this is needed to pay for our obligation abate at a lower interest rate, therefore a lower cost, what other cost-cutting measures will be implemented by the airport to ensure that we can meet our obligations, to include this one if revenues continue to decline? And then maybe the last one, before I go to the second round, is because our revenues are down and we still not, I don't know, we're able to make timely payments or not, even with the reduced interest rate, has there been any consideration to ask for a deferment? So I want to make sure that all those questions are asked so that our folks can know that you know, we're really transparent in all of this. So I'll take it however it comes in, Mr. Chair, from any members of the panel, and I can repeat any questions again if they want to.
All right, thank you. Ricky, would you be the one to start out, and then maybe Gita can...
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, if I may just note for the record also, I was looking over the BBMR's comments on the bill, and that's how some of these questions came to play. So I didn't want to waste my 5 minutes reading the comments, but maybe someone else can read it into the record.
All right, we'll have Ricky handle that. Ricky, are you good?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Speaker, for your questions. I guess to answer your first question related to how the airport will be able to pay the debt service, the current debt service level this year was already budgeted for. So any debt service reduction, obviously, will have already been covered because it would be less than what we had already expected to pay. As it relates to your second question about what cost-cutting measures the airport has instituted, like I mentioned, I think in the governor's message, which we assisted in terms of providing some data on what the airport has done in terms of cost-cutting. In fiscal year 2020, even before I got to the airport and in continuing on through that for fiscal year 20, the airport was able to reduce operating expenses. That's not debt service expenses, that's specifically operating expenses by 20%. I think it's about 19.8% in fiscal year 20 unaudited. And so we continued that cost cutting into fiscal year 2021. Obviously, the only thing we can compare to is what did we spend in 2020 and what did we budget for in 2021. But we continued that cost cutting through 2021. And in addition to that, at the board's direction, we did also start looking at existing contracts that we were able to reduce due to the low employment numbers. And so, contracts like custodial and baggage services were reduced until such time we were able to achieve a lot more travelers that would make a lot more sense. And so I think at a board meeting, we did estimate some of that savings if it was through March or September to be about 1 to 2 million additional savings on top of the already carried over savings, or sorry, not savings, but cost reductions from FY20. We also did institute or have mentioned to the board that we didn't budget for vacant positions. And so with the exception of obviously safety and security related positions that are completely necessary for us to ensure that we comply with all federal rules and regulations. So safety and security were the only exceptions. So we also have done that not only fiscal year 20, but also moving into this fiscal year. I will note that the CARES Act money that we received did require an employee retention requirement. And so And I think the requirement of employee retention, and I think the basis of that was really the CARES Act money that is separate from all the other CARES Act money. This is CARES Act money through the FAA required us to ensure that we retained employment, that we kept employment at the airport. And so we have achieved that that requirement in the CARES Act money that came with the CARES Act funds and grants. And so I hope that answers the second question. I think as it relates to the third question, which I think hopefully my first answer had addressed, is that with the debt service reduction, we hope to cover that with what was already budgeted for. And I think that, like I had mentioned previously, Mr. Chair and Speaker, that with the debt service reduction, we're hoping to just match what we expect the revenue reduction to be. And what that revenue reduction might be is really what drives us to request for the flexibility in the type of bond refinancing that is being requested. And because of this being such a volatile year, well, I mean, not really volatile, it's actually just going down and sustaining that that trend, that if we look at even a good, maybe a possible good worst case scenario, that we would be in a very difficult situation, looking at probably something similar to what we experienced in FY 2020. And that's in addition to what we had already projected at being a much lower revenue projection this year compared to last fiscal year. And so the way we'll be able to pay the debt service is that debt service is a priority for the airport to ensure that we pay that, just as it is, I believe, for the government and any other autonomous agency, is that debt service is a priority for us to pay. And so this refinancing will allow us to meet the objective of coupling the reduction in operation and maintenance expenses with reduction in debt service costs, which we hope will allow us to meet what we will start seeing what those actual revenues will come in at. But like Mel mentioned, there is some hope with the vaccine, and we're hoping that this one tool in Bill 429 will help us bridge that gap until we can, obviously go back to some semblance of normalcy. I hope that answers all the questions, Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Senator Kelly, do you have any questions, ma'am?
Hungin. So as we've noted in other similar bills, that the market has stabilized as of recently, so that's a positive. We do note that in October 2013, it was the Airport Authority refinanced part of its 2013 bonds, and that did result in substantial savings. Does it factor in at all that the Airport Authority just achieved that refinancing shortly? We heard the credit ratings, but are there any other considerations that work against the airport since it did just recently refinance?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Senator and Mr. Chair, if I may address the question and directly. Yes, the airport had previously refinanced a portion of the 2013 bonds in 2019, and in that refinancing, the airport achieved and thankfully with the legislature support as well as this legislature support, as well as the administration, we were able to provide and get those reduction in debt service. And I call them reduction because at this point in FY20, we were down 30 million in revenues. And so the reduction in debt service was very helpful in trying to address the gap. And so, in terms of FY21, the same thing. I think the estimate of reduction in debt service was, I think, 9 to 10 million in fiscal year 20 and 9 to 10 million in fiscal year 21. And so that reduction in debt service really helped us bridge the gap that was really unexpected. And so we were able to address that, and as well as in this fiscal year, 2021, of the 9 million in reduced debt service, because the revenues were low and our expected employments were much lower than in the previous years, that what we had done with the 10 million in debt service reduction in 2021 was, instead of setting that aside for capital improvement projects, we set aside 2 million of that for capital improvement projects, and we allowed for 8 million to go back into lowering the airline fees and charges, because airline fees and charges obviously are driven by employments and obviously airline activity. And because the airline activity was much lower, you're looking at a denominator that obviously will make airline fees and revenue skyrocket, right? And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't have a negative impact on airline fees and charges. And so what we did with that was we used that to help augment what would have been a drastic increase in airline fees and charges, which would then obviously have a ripple effect, right, on the ability for airlines to operate. And so that's what we did with those savings for fiscal year 20 and 21.
Situus Maasi. And is there a difference between the refinancing of the 2013 and the 2019 bonds?
Would you mind clarifying, Senator, what you mean by the difference?
Well, yeah, exactly that. We know that you had refinanced the 2013 bonds, so I'm just wondering if there's any material difference by also working with the 2019. Yeah, is there anything that makes one easier, one more difficult, one have more repercussions?
Certainly. Thank you for that question. I think when you look at the 2013, the process for bond issuance is the same, whether or not we're including 2019 or remaining or keeping it as 2013 alone. Where the difference will lie, and the net present value savings will probably be right around the same, including 2019. But where you'll really see the substantial difference from our analysis is in the cash flow, the debt service required between, if we keep it just 2013, it'll be one level. If we add on 2019, it'll bring debt service down even further. Because remember, the priority with this particular refinancing is immediate relief for the airport's liquidity needs in fiscal 21 and 22. And with that as the priority here, what we're looking at is it does not appear that we're, from the work that Gita has done with our underwriters, with the airport, with the governor's fiscal team, what we see here is that net present value looks about the same, that we're still saving. We're saving actual dollars. We're saving as far as the interest rate. What we're looking at is from 1 year to the next, if we keep it at 2013, a potential savings difference of $9.5 million or so. What that means is that if we don't include 2019, then the airport would be paying more in debt service coverage or debt service than they would if we do include 2019. So the relief for including 2019 is that there is upfront room to breathe for the airport with regard to debt service in the short term. And in the long term, no major effects as far as net present value savings to the people of Guam or interest, et cetera.
Situus Maasi for the clarification. And on one hand, it's very important to see that it must be achieving, that this deal must be achieving at least a 2% reduction. But is that achievable? Is there any point that might be difficult to attain? And I just wanted to look at the 2% and its level of achievability for the airport.
We believe that 2% is very achievable. We believe that savings will be greater than 5%, anywhere from 5 all the way up to 6.5%. But we believe that there is there's cushion there, because if you're looking, we're not saying 2% and 2.5 or 2% and 3%. We're saying at this point in time, we're projecting a savings of anywhere from 5.5 to about 6.2, right? And so that is significantly above 2%. I can't, in the term that we're looking, I mean, we're looking at the timeline we're looking at to issuance. I think that those numbers are relatively reliable as far as projections.
And the last question that I have for this round is, in looking through the fiscal note, that they said that there is a possibility of increased debt service perhaps later on down the road. Do you agree with that assessment, or did you read that as the same in the fiscal note, where they stated that there is a possibility of increased debt service farther on down the road?
I think, and I'll go ahead and I'll let Ricky speak to this after I just make one comment on it. I think Ricky should address this after I make one comment on it. While there might be increased debt service coverage down the road, really, again, the objective of this particular bond is upfront cash flow savings to the airport because of the uncertainty of enplanements in the coming fiscal year or two. So given that, even with, if debt service was to go up in the coming years, at that point in time, we would anticipate that the airport would have returned to near to normal operations, and as such is the case, would be able to handle the debt load as they had in years past. And then along those lines, I'd also like to add the ability to take advantage of triple tax exempt refinancing in 2023. So in the event that the body had the appetite to further look for savings and market conditions permitted, and the airport would wanted to pursue this route, they could potentially look at triple tax exempt in 2023 refunding of the 2013 bonds. So that's another consideration I think that could factor into your analysis as you consider this particular issuance. Ricky, did you want to add?
Yeah, sure. Senator Marsh, thank you for the question. I think what you might be specifically referencing is the statement here on the BBMAR fiscal note that reads, cash flow savings that may be realized between 21 and 22 is approximately 24 million, while the restructuring could result in approximately 12.7 million in combined increase in debt service between 23 and 26. And I think just to provide context to that specific line on the fiscal note, I think that what the fiscal note was trying to delineate were two different options in what this bill allows us to do. We can do a direct refinancing, or we can do some level of restructuring. And so if we did some level of restructuring, which still would achieve the 2% net present value savings, the restructuring contemplated was to take as much debt service that we have that is expected for 2021 and 2022, and mainly 2022, and move that out to 23, 24, 25, and 26, so that we can achieve some level of flexibility in terms of reduced debt service costs in the years where we are quite sure there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. And so I think what might need to be noted is that in 2022, I believe the debt service was supposed to, and was already expected to, based on our debt service payment schedule, to have been increased, because in the refinancing for 2019, the savings that were received, as I recall, the savings that were received in 2020 and 2021, which were eaten up by obviously the reduced revenues, were expected to have increased. So the total debt service, I believe, was down to around 13 million in 2020 and 2021, and then it was supposed to go back up as it would have been, as it was planned to go back up to around 22, 23 million. And so in 2022 is where we're looking at very significant savings if we were to add, if we were to restructure, and then we would push that debt service that was expected to be paid in 2022 out to 2023, 24, 25, and 26, as what the BBMAR fiscal note was mentioning. And so that would happen, and we would already expect that to happen. We would plan for that increase to happen because we would want to, as much as possible, give us a lot more flexibility in 21 and 22, which are the years, obviously, in which we're going to be dealing with this pandemic and the impacts to air travel. And so what Melanie had mentioned regarding in 2023, we do have the option of issuing what is considered triple tax exempt or tax exempt AMT bonds in 2023, because that will be the 10-year mark of the original 2013 bonds. And so what we've been, what has been explained to at least the airport by Gita, as well as bond counsel and the underwriters, is that if we're in 2023, once that time happens, because tax exempt bonds have a higher possibility to get lower interest rates, right? Because it's triple tax exempt or tax exempt generally, that we may be able to go out in 2023 for refunding, so that any uncertainty when we get to 2023 could be addressed at that time through a refunding of our bonds to lower the debt service a little bit further through savings. And so I hope that kind of helps to understand and answer the question. But by no means did we, debt service, when we lock it in, it's locked in. And so if there's any expected increase, especially as identified in the BBMAR fiscal note, those are expected and those are intended because we want to try to make sure that this fiscal year and next fiscal year, the years where we will probably feel the most impact from the pandemic are the years where we have as much flexibility to address the reductions in revenues.
Sutuis Masi for that explanation. And I think part of what is really helpful to hear as well is, as we saw in 2019 and we're now seeing again in 2020 and 2021, is whatever gets put into place, it's not set in stone, that there is the ability to go back and restructure or refinance again to make sure that we're still at more optimal conditions for the airport. So I'll save my other questions for the next round. So Sutuis Masi.
Thank you. Senator Reese, do you have any questions, ma'am?
Yes, thank you very much. So I want to thank all of you on the panel for your explanations. They've answered most of my questions. So, but if I could just clarify, when the airport GIAA refinanced pursuant to Public Law 35-33, GITA issued a report in November 2019 saying that the savings on that refinancing was going to be about 15 million. It was going to be used towards CIPs, and then they listed the CIPs totaling 15 million, including design of cargo apron, local share of FAA grant eligible CIPs, complete terminal roof replacement design, cooling tower upgrade, facility emergency generator, and lighting vault. But then I think I heard you say today that you had to take the bulk of that savings and use it because of the reduction in revenue caused by the pandemic, and you only were able to use $2 million for CIP projects versus the 15 million that was slated from the last refinancing. Is that correct, or am I hearing that wrong?
No, you're correct on the 2 million related to, and sorry, Senator Charlie, thank you for the question. You're correct on the 2 million, but that would be for fiscal year 2021. If you don't mind, I could have Frank explain some of the related projects, because the FAA grants either 100% or 90% match, really. So I think as it relates to some of the $15 million in capital improvement projects, the ones that you listed, as you listed them and as I heard them, it sounds like a lot of them have already, we have already actually started some of those projects and design of the cargo apron, the cooling tower project. And so, but I just wanted to just before, if Mr. Chair Frank could speak after me, that the $2 million was specifically related to the expectation that if there was no pandemic and 2021 came in as expected, then we would have put the full 10 million toward capital improvement projects. But because that didn't come into fruition, we set aside 2 million, which I believe was enough to at least meet the match of some of the projects that had federal grant matches. But if I may, Frank, if you could elaborate a little bit more and add to that, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Mr. Chair and Senators. On that question, relative to the 10 million that we expected during FY20, and of course with COVID, we did not generate the revenues in order to set aside the $10 million. So those projects, or the bulk of the projects, were actually deferred. And of course, we're putting them now for this fiscal year if money is available, or we fund them as money becomes available. So the 10 million that was set aside or in the last refunding was not realized. So that ended up being considered savings to the revenue requirement for the airport's FY20 budget. And therefore, the FAA also stepped in as part of the CARES grant and provided us about 20.7 million, of which the bulk of it has been used for FY20 for operations expenses. But part of their relief also was in the form of the grants that we receive for the runway rehabilitation projects, which is over 20 million, of which the relief was in the form of no airport share. So that assisted us in our pursuit of continuing some of the projects that we deem to be essential to safety and security. I hope that answered your question, Senator.
Yes, I think, can you just clarify, when you say the 10 million, Gita said 15 million in their November letter. Are we talking about the same? They were saying there was going to be a $15 million savings. Are you saying 10 million because that's how much was, why are you saying 10, I guess, versus the 15?
Well, I think the 15 million was over a 2 fiscal year period.
Okay.
Which includes this year, the current fiscal year.
All right, so how much of so out of the 15 million, 2 million was used on these projects. Was the design of cargo apron completed? Because that was supposed to be the revenue generating project.
No, ma'am. We did proceed with the procurement action. We have selected a A&E, architect engineer. We're at this point now where we're collaborating or discussing that particular funding with the FAA for FY21. The FAA has indicated, though, that we could use our own funds and they will be willing to reimburse us at a later date. But we want to make sure that we have the funding to take care of our revenue requirement for operations and maintenance first. So that right now is deferred to this year, and hopefully we have enough money to get the design proceeding.
Okay, so to clarify then, when we authorize by law,
Senators, we may have to take a break. They need to reset the videos froze. So let's just take a 5-minute, have them reset, and then we'll get right back to your questions, ma'am. My colleagues, we will recess until 2 o'clock. All right? Thank you.